Hi, Plotly Studio community. Welcome to the next video in our Connecting Plotly Studio to Different Data Sources video series. Today we're going to be connecting to one of the most popular data sources in the data analytics space, Snowflake. If you've worked with data, you've probably heard the name Snowflake, but what actually is Snowflake? Snowflake is a cloud-based data platform that lets companies store, query, and share massive amounts of data without needing to manage the infrastructure on their own. It's a supercharged database that lives entirely in the cloud, so your team can access it and analyze data from anywhere all at once. Let me pull open my trial instance of Snowflake that I just signed up for here a few days ago. So why is Snowflake so popular? A few reasons. As more businesses moved to the cloud, they needed a data solution that could keep up, one that was fast, flexible, and didn't require a team of engineers to maintain. And Snowflake hit the gap perfectly. On top of it, it made it really easy for different teams or even different companies to securely share data with each other in real time, which was really important in the big data wave of the last couple of years around COVID. So today, Snowflake powers data teams at tens of thousands of companies, from startups to Fortune 500. It's become the backbone of the cloud analytics world. It's one of the most popular data sources that we see Plotly Studio users connect to and start making sense of with data. So let's learn a little bit more here about our Snowflake instance. Down here in the corner, I can actually see my account and go to connect a tool to Snowflake, and I'll get a lot of the different configuration information about my Snowflake instance. One of the things that makes Snowflake so popular is that it's so customizable. And so today I'm going to be walking folks through the basic case of connecting to Snowflake, which is with username and password, but many organizations are going to have more complex patterns necessary to connect to data. And so we'll touch on some of those nuances at the end, but things like multi-factor authentication, OAuth, programmatic access token, we'll talk about those nuances. Today we're mainly focusing on connecting Plotly Studio with username and password. And so let me pull up my account details here. And so I'm going to move this over to the side and actually start a project to connect Plotly Studio to Snowflake. So I'm going to create a new project here in Plotly Studio. I'm part of the Plotly org right now, and that org typically has credits ready to go. And so connect to Snowflake is one of our most popular options. I'm just going to click this here to connect. And so Plotly Studio Data Sources is now going to ask me for my credentials. And so let's go back over here to Snowflake and show you the account details. I have all of this here in my account details. My organization account identifier is the first key that's necessary. My username and password, which I'm not going to share with the folks here on the video, are things I'm going to need to input. And warehouse is an optional argument. Snowflake will default to a warehouse typically, so that's not needed to input. And role is another that is often used when connecting to data that we don't need to do here in this demo because I have a very basic Snowflake configuration that doesn't federate access to data based on roles, but your use case can vary. And so if you wanted to add role to the configuration form, just ask the agent to do so. And let's go ahead and run that demo. And so there we go. I've enriched my data connection to also allow me to provide a Snowflake role as an optional parameter. It's going to default to sysadmin. I'm going to use the role I'm logged into right now, which is account admin. And so let's save these credentials. And so Plotly Studio is going to test the connection and see which tables and databases and schemas are available in Snowflake for me to make sense of. And so I've successfully logged in. And so you can see that my Snowflake account has 4 different databases, which I can into and make sense of. And so let's look at data in the Snowflake sample data database. So you'll notice, like, unlike traditional programming, sometimes I'm not always being as precise with my syntax because the LLM helps handle some of those rough edges. And so now that I've let it know which data base I'm curious about, I can actually see all of the different tables available to make sense of here. And you can really be as open-ended in terms of which data you'd like to retrieve from this database. I can write a query that's as simple as a select star from a specific table, like this call center table here at the top, or I can pull a really complicated view down that I've tested in Snowflake that joins many tables in a complicated manner and just copy and paste that query here into the chat dialog. Another approach I could take is to start with asking a question and letting the LLM help me find the right table and explore the data. So a couple modes of interaction here with Plotly Studio that are going to depend on you and how well you know your data source and how ready you are to jump in and start making sense of data. And so I don't know this data super well, so I'm a little bit in exploratory mode right now. And so I'd like to see data about the customers in this database joining the tables that seem easily joined to the customer table to norm. So let's just ask it to pull data from the customer table as well as any related tables that could be important. And so it creating an artifact. It's joining it with the customer address table. It's joining it with the customer demographics table. And right now it's going to return me a version of this data of 1,000 records just to kind of give me a sample of this data and let me start playing with it as I build out my visualization. And so here you can see this joined 3 tables. The SQL's dynamically been generated. I can actually see this code here on the code tab. And so the spec describes our process completely end to end, the data source that's been created, how we've mapped the data, what we've done to transform it, some details about the query. The code shows us how it's actually implemented, how it's retrieving credentials from the credentials form that we defined earlier to ultimately connect to Snowflake with Python. And so to that end, if I wanted to enrich this table with some data that wasn't easily available, I could. And so I don't know this data super well. I'm not going to ask it to enrich right now. I'm just going to start here and customer sales analysis. No, I'm just going to start with this table here today and see how I can better understand and build an intuition for the data here. So I've hit continue, and Plotly Studio is now going to go into the app building mode for this data frame that I've just connected to in Snowflake. So a couple of different options as my data frame starts to load and render. If I really just wanted a open-ended, help me understand what this data represents and build me a sample app and dashboard that shows me what's in this table, these data, what are common visualizations that others would make with this type of data, I can just hit this generate charts button here. So I'm going to start there as a way to understand this data, but I can also go to explore mode to make more sense of it. And so you can see that explore mode is a series of different charts that I could add to my dashboard, and it makes recommendations of other analyses. And so when I clicked this generate 6, it picked some of the most popular charts and visualizations from this explore mode, but I can come here for other ideas to better understand my users and whatnot. And so I'm not going to give a full Plotly Studio demo, but just wanting to show what's possible once I start to connect to my Snowflake data. All right, well, while this app loads, we'll let this last chart load and it'll render a layout. Let me switch back over to Snowflake and talk about some of the different nuances and different ways I could have maybe approached this connection to Snowflake. So some of the common alternate credential patterns, users or admins can require you to use multi-factor authentication with Snowflake. And so this requires for every user individually registering a MFA, and you need to either append your code to your password as it's entered, or provide two separate arguments. So two different options here for entering MFA with Snowflake that'll require you as a user to adapt your credential form to meet this condition. One of the other approaches that Plotly Studio can kind of work with is programmatic access tokens. And so here in my Snowflake settings, is it settings? It might be team actually. One second. Yeah, manage accounts. Let's search. All right, so here under settings, authentication, you can see where here I can register an MFA for my account. If I were to use MFA as a setting, we're not going to do so in this flow. If I wanted to use programmatic access tokens, this is a common pattern that is used to prevent providing individual credentials in a dashboard or data app. And so when I am sharing the app that I built with Plotly Studio, we keep the credentials private, but if you wanted to keep them extra private, you could generate a token and you could use this programmatic access token instead of a username and password to connect to Snowflake. One of the popular options that we're still working on and actively looking at for the next couple of releases is OAuth. And so a lot of organizations elect to use single sign-on with an identity provider that makes it so that users don't have as many usernames and passwords they have to remember. They can use a constant login and know of some like Okta or Google Cloud. There's all sorts of different identity providers out there. And if you're using OAuth with your Snowflake organization, we recommend the exception to generate programmatic access tokens when connecting to Snowflake. Plotly Studio plans on connecting or supporting OAuth access in the near future. Today, it doesn't. And so programmatic access tokens do require a bit more configuration. So again, work with your admin if you're excited to connect Plotly Studio with Snowflake to understand your particular Snowflake credential situation a little bit more. And so that's it here for the demo. Here's the sample app that was built with the data here connected from Snowflake. And so I'm going to get to exploring and try to understand this little data a bit more. But thanks for watching and learning about Snowflake and how to connect Plotly Studio to Snowflake. I hope to see you do the same and start building soon. Take care.